Welcome, dear viewer. This is Derpy, and I know I take a long time to pump out every single video here and there. It's every so often, every month or so, but you gotta keep in mind that this is a hobby, okay? I'm not out here as a dedicated YouTuber. Like, I like doing this, but at the end of the day, this is just a hobby. It's not some that I wake up every single day and think, oh shoot, man, what am I gonna do for another video on YouTube? Like, do I care for my subscribers? For how, how small of a channel I have? For the people who watch it? Yes, I'm very grateful for the people who watch my content, but I would prefer if you expect a schedule, or if you expect something out of me. I would rather you unsubscribe than be unsatisfied with my content and stay subscribed. So, I'm saying it right here, right now, that I'm sorry, but if you're subscribed and you do not like my content, or you don't like the fact that I don't have a schedule, then I would politely ask you to unsubscribe, because I don't want you to be frustrated at me, because this is just a hobby. And if I did have a detailed schedule of like whenever I was going to upload, that would get boring after a while, having to make a video at a certain deadline. It would make the entire thing about YouTube and Dark Souls 3, it would make it boring if I had to like constantly gather footage and go do a commentary. Like, I'm sorry, but it would just get really, really boring for me. But, if you stick around my channel, then please believe me when I say that I am very, very grateful that you actually watch my content. And, even if you watch it for like 2 minutes or play it in the background or don't even really pay attention, that's fine with me, honestly. This is honestly more so just a hobby. It's just a hobby. And if I can get a shout out or something, shoot. I'd rather not have one, because then I feel I have more obligation to follow up to that standard. But I just wanted to show off a way that I counter off lag, or at least minimize the damage that I take during lag. Because it is frustrating to not even see your opponent's animations, and then all of a sudden you take like 5 hits out of nowhere. So when I get to it, I'll showcase it off, at least what I do. And it's easy. You don't have to worry about no advanced tech or anything. I'm not about that. I'm not some crazy, guru on like PvP. I'm just giving my 2 thoughts and what works for me. But hopefully, if it works for me, it works for you. So, if you don't know about it, I at least want to, give it to your attention, so you can at least consider it. But one thing about this area is, there's a couple things, is the Hollow Priest and the dragons. The Hollow Priest is especially useful for you as an invader. They are easy to kill if you're a host and phantom. But if you're an invader, you really, really want to keep them alive if you can. If you can, it's not really a big deal, but you at least want them to get their buff off. If not for you as an invader, at least to the enemies in the vicinity. Because the miracle that they cast is Sacred Oath, but it's crazy. It's like double the amount that like Sacred Oath should do. Some people refer it as Secret Oath, which I like, so we'll just call it Secret Oath. Now, Secret Oath is such a fantastic buff as an invader. So what will happen is that it will increase your stats, your absorption, your damage and stuff like that. So, and it's not even like a small buff. It's a very considerable buff. So if you get that buff, just make sure to do what you can with it, because it does last a while, but you want to inflict as much mayhem as you can as an invader. So that's one thing that sets Lothric Castle apart. But also, the dragons also are kind of a area denial type of enemy. So if they're dead already, it's not really a big deal, but it definitely does help. And I'll showcase a couple instances where they came in clutch. But as you can see here in this clip, the host is laggy, but the phantom isn't. And that makes it very difficult for me, because the phantom is, well, first off, he has a very good shield, and he also has a katana, which is a relatively fast weapon. But you see here, All I did was R1. That's all you gotta do. That works like 80% of the time for me. If it doesn't outright kill the lagging opponent, then it does pretty much just like damage them to all heck, so they do have to like step back and heal. But it is an issue whenever the host is laggy, or at least one person is laggy and the other isn't, and like one of them has a fast weapon and the other has a heavy weapon, because then it's hard to tell because you can't see their animation. So at that point you really want to play passively, and I hate playing passively. You know, I don't really particularly like, you know, just holding my shield, backpedaling, retreating to enemies. This is what I like to do against people who try and parry me. What I do is an R1, kick R1, they take bonus damage. I notice the host is running up on me, I put my shield up, his connection finally caught up to speed, and I was able to block the damage. Now you could roll out of it, but I usually just block it because I can't really dictate how much lag there is, and I can't really time my rolls in accordance to that. So I mean, if you feel comfortable and you know, get it down to a T, then I guess you could do it, but like I can't do it against this type of lag. This type of lag is it's just insane. I can't do that. So what I do to counter this is just like I have to play passive. Like I can't really run in there and try and pursue the host. And one thing that I didn't know up until recently was password summoned phantoms do not receive that like penalty or that timer or that cooldown timer. And look at that, man. So what happens is that the password summoned phantoms, they don't suffer that cooldown. They can just like go back into the world, put down their sign immediately, and like instantaneously they'll be back in the host world. There's no cooldown timer for them. So in the next Dark Souls or whatever from FromSoft, if they have PvP, please change that, man. Like I don't want to deal with like instant summon phantoms again. Get rid of the summoner class, please. Please get rid of that summoner class. It's the best staying class in the game. But so what I try and do for this is like I notice that the Lothric Knight is getting taken out, and I have to retreat. There's no way I can fight two people who are lagging like this, so I have to retreat. Like it is kind of it's pretty boring to play like this, having to play so passive and stuff, but there's no other way I know how to counter this. If you know a way how to counter this type of, you know, lag, please let me know, because I don't like doing this type of approach, but it's the only way I know how to counter this type of lag in an invasion anyway. In duels, I kind of just suck it up and just go like whatever, but man, dude, I just cannot fight these type of people who lag, man. And it's made worse when they have hyper armor weapons, because they can like poise through your weapons and they won't be stunned at all. So you gotta be careful of that, and you can't see their animation, so you don't know when they hit you. So you just gotta be ready at all times for the most part. The weapon that I'm using is the Ring Knight Straightsword for this. That's mainly because I cannot use a glaive against two people or multiple people, so I have to go. You know, I have to resort to a more crowd control type weapon, which is the Straightsword. And it would be better if I have a hyper armor weapon, which the glaive is, but the problem with the glaive is that it's more so of a single target weapon. So I'm kind of trying to make use of everything that I have, which is, you know, bombs, you know, my weaponry and all that. So unfortunately, it really kind of doesn't really help that much, because it's just kind of doing chip damage at this point, because I'm not doing as much damage as I could with this thing. And that's the thing with the Ring Knight Straightsword, is that you're not going to be doing that much damage with this thing. But this weapon, I love it because of the combo potential and the fact that it's, you know, it's not... You probably wouldn't expect it coming from me, but I promise you, like, I do not like using straight swords. I do like using this straight sword because of the weapon art and stuff like that, and I don't feel cheesy because it does like 250 damage or something, and then on an R1 and stuff like that, I do like reasonable damage that I feel like a straight sword should do with this thing. And my stats aren't like getting the most damage I could have out of this weapon, but I do like the weapon art and the combos and playing aggressive and all that. So that's one thing that I do enjoy about this weapon. is I don't really feel cheesy using a straight sword if it's this one, mainly because like it doesn't do insane damage like some other ones do, like the Lothric straight sword. But you know, if you haven't tried it out, I implore you, try it out. If you have an aggressive playstyle and you like doing combos and don't parry too much, I promise you that you'll have a fun time with this weapon. So the host is running back, and I'm using the glaive. That's one good thing about the glaive, is that it's a pretty good pursuing weapon, because the running attack has that like not AoE, sorry. It has that like, whenever you miss with like an ultra weapon, that like phantom stagger that they have if they miss a little bit, like it's more prevalent on, say, like a great axe. Like if they whiff, you still get stunned, but you didn't, you know, get hit. So it's good for that, because even if you miss with the glaive's attack, then they can still get stunned, and that can allow you to pick up the momentum and stay on them. But the glaive also, like, it's just such a good weapon to pursue people with, and I predominantly, if someone's running away, that's the weapon I go for, because I can just chain running attacks so easily, and like the momentum from the attacks actually keep me on them, so even if I miss, the phantom stagger is still there, and I can just keep on them. So this man is summoning some blues, he's summoning his phantom back in, so this did take quite a while to defeat this guy. So and it's just laggy all over the place. I think for this invasion, I think this was probably on my end. But one thing that I wanted to mention was the importance of damage in an invasion. And I know I can already hear it. Of course you want damage in an invasion. Against a 3v1 or a 4v2, it goes without saying. But you also have to consider the other factor that goes into it. Because what's going to deter a host from just spamming R1 after the 2-hit stun that you inflicted, you know? Say for instance you're going for R1, R1, R2 combo with the straight sword. If you delay an R2 and they're just really, really aggressive or not very bright, they'll just spam R1. And you'll be the one who's going to end up punished. And that's not what you want. What you want is going to be spooking the host with your damage, so you can get your pseudo combos and roll catch game on. And of course you don't want it to be insane to where they'll just be passive and just backpedal with the, you know, their shield up and all that. But you don't want it to be so low to where they just don't care and they'll just completely just R1 mash regardless. I mean, you can punish that too. I'm not saying that, you know, you need high speed damage or some. I mean, you can punish that aggressive behavior with, let's say, like a parry or just R1 spam, and it usually works most of the time. Like, look at there, I just R1 spam. I didn't care about no pseudo combos. Sometimes the best course of action is just R1 spam. Sometimes it just works. Some instances you'll see me just go R1. Sometimes it'll just carry you to victory. And I mean, you don't need crazy high speed damage like a Ouroboros, L1 true combo, split leaf, twin blade, whatever the fudge. But it's important to keep in mind of how much damage you're dealing to a host, how they react to it, and how much damage you're actually inflicting on them. Because if they're just gonna be R1 mashing and all that out of your, you know, hits, then you should take notice of that and try and punish that. Like with the Ring Knight Straight Sword, it doesn't deal amazing damage, but the thing is that it's a straight sword. So a lot of that damage, even though it's pretty moderate, racks up. So it's still nothing to be scoffed at, but this build isn't meant to deal a ton of damage. This build is meant for me to be able to use a lot of weapons that I like in the game. So you'll see me using a lot of other weapons with this build, and it's a lot of weapons that I predominantly use just even off screen and all that. But another thing that piqued my interest when I was recording this was the announcement of Dark Souls 1 Remaster. And I do want to talk about that. Well, Dark Souls 1 getting a remaster, I feel was kind of... Personally, I would have wanted to see a Demon Souls remaster myself, like a lot of other people. But I mean, am I mad that they did a remaster on Dark Souls 1? No, not really, no. I mean, it would have been nice to see some Demon Souls because I never played it. But Dark Souls 1 being, you know, being the first one that I ever played, I do have a soft spot for it. I mean, I'm trying not to look at it with rose-tinted glasses because it did have issues. And I see a lot of people complaining about Dark Souls 1 getting remastered, and then, you know, they just look at the PvP and be like, man, Poison's gonna be so broken, man. Like, I don't think I'm gonna be too engrossed in the PvP, but PvE is gonna be a real shoo-in for me. I mean, I can't blame them. PvP does look pretty wonky at first if you actually just look at it from, you know, face value. But once you start playing it, like, that's when it starts clicking. A lot of the things that you're like, man, this is so dumb. But once you actually start playing it, you start finding counters, how to play against it, and all this other things. Like, I'll give you an anecdotal story for mine. Like, I remember I was completely garbo at Dark Souls 1 PvP, and I thought a lot of the things were unfair, such as poise, defense, and, you know, backstabs especially was one of the main things that I got really upset at. But one thing that I really wish that I knew then that I know now is that don't look at, say, the PvP of a game and just be like, man, this is gonna be broken, I'm not gonna like it, man, I'm gonna stick to what I know and what I like. Like, don't be like that. Like, I remember in Dark Souls 3 when I first got it, I hated, absolutely detested the fact that there was no poise. I thought it was dumb. But that's the thing, is that once I started doing duels and doing PvP and invasions, that's when I was like, okay, I don't really have an issue with this at all anymore. And in fact, I actually enjoy it because I can do a lot of pseudo combos and roll catches and all this other stuff. And I like the implementation of hyper armor on certain weapons. But that's the thing, is that I had to overlook the thing that was causing me issues and overcome it and learn how to play. Okay? That's one thing that if you're going to go to Dark Souls 1, you're going to have to do as well, because the PvP in that game is a lot different than Dark Souls 3 PvP. And I hear all these discussions and rumors about them implementing, like, changes to the original, like, omnidirectional rolling and all this other stuff, and I'm honestly convinced that it's probably not going to be changed whatsoever. The only thing that's going to probably be changed is the matchmaking and, of course, the graphical upgrade. But other than that, I don't see anything else changing in terms of that. But one thing that, or well, two things that really are concerning for me was the matchmaking in Dark Souls 1. And I really hope they tweak it in Dark Souls 1 and make it somewhat similar to Dark Souls 3's matchmaking. Because twinking in that game in Dark Souls 1 was absolutely ridiculous. You'll see what I mean if you see some old Dark Souls 1 videos, because it's absolutely horrid. Absolutely atrocious. I thought Dragon Slayer with lightning resin was mean in Dark Souls 3 as a twink, but no, that doesn't even come close. Does not even come close to Dark Souls 1 twinks. Absolutely horrid. Absolutely awful. The Undead Berg is infamous for twinks. Absolutely just ridiculous on how easy you could make a twink in Dark Souls 1. And that was the thing. There was no weapon level matchmaking in that game. You could go like level 20 with a plus 15 in that instance, because you can go to level 15 in Dark Souls 1. You can go in the Berg with the level plus 15 straight sword and just 3-shot people. It was insane. But another thing was invading, and it was matchmaking that was the issue, because if you were at level 90, say like at level 99, like if you put it in the calculator or something like that, it will say like level 120 or something, like a 20 level above and 20 level below is the range where you can invade. But that's not the case with Dark Souls 1. The thing with Dark Souls 1 invading was that you could invade someone a much higher soul level than you, and they won't get downscaled, or you won't be on an even playing field with them. They'll still retain all their damage, defense, poise, all that nonsense. So I really do hope that they fix that. That's probably the only two things I'm really concerned about. In terms of backstabs and poise and all that, like, if you are scared or you are concerned, then I advise you to watch a YouTuber on Dark Souls 1 or something. Because Dark Souls 1 PvP is fun. Like, I'm telling you, it is fun. Now, like, fighting metas, like meta level and stuff like that, probably not. But doing random invasions at, say, like a low level or something, it is fun. I'm not gonna lie, it's really, really fun. But don't go into there with negative feedback and, like, implications, you know, like, just learn how to play the game. Like, I'm not trying to sound arrogant or ignorant when I say that. Like, just try and figure out ways to deal with things. Like, learn how to... But that's the thing with Dark Souls 1 PvP, was that glitches was a very big part of PvP in Dark Souls 1. Toggle escapes, counter backstabbing, in terms of, like... It was just... Oh, man. And I really hope they don't change that either, because it could really screw the Dark Souls PvP. And I really hope they don't alter anything with that, but who knows. Maybe they will patch some things here and there. But honestly, as it is, Dark Souls PvP, it's pretty... Yeah, well, it's fun, but it's kind of broken in some instances. Is it bad? Depends. Depends if you're going for a duel or invasion or whatever have you, you know. But there's a lot of cool things that you could do in Dark Souls 1 that you can't really do in Dark Souls 3. Like making a status build in Dark Souls 1. It was super easy to proc, like, certain things. Like Toxic was really, really easy to proc. Poison was ridiculously easy to proc. Bleed, even though Bleed was only on a couple of weapons. And that was the thing with Dark Souls 1. Only certain weapons could have Bleed. You can't infuse them with Bleed or whatever. There was no Carthus Rouge. There was only certain weapons like katanas and scythes that had innate Bleed. So, but pretty much any weapon can have poison, but not Toxic. But Toxic, I hardly ever see Toxic in this game. The only time I ever see Toxic ever proc is at the Profane Capital. Now, Toxic in Dark Souls 1 was absolutely insane. I remember you can make a Toxic build that was really, really effective with, like, there was 4 sources. There was Toxic Mist, Dung Pie, and 2 other weapons that could proc Toxin. And it was absolutely crazy, because it lasted for 10 minutes and it did 7 HP per second. And times the minutes by seconds. 10 times 60, that's 600. Times that by the HP, that's 4,200 HP in total. Unless they have a Blossoming Moss in that case. But, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to make a build and actually invade a Blighttown. Like, Blighttown at 60 FPS, shoo, even, like, it doesn't even have to be 60 FPS. As long as it's playable, that's all I want. That is all I want, is just be able to invade a Blighttown with, like, a Toxic or a Poison Invader. But, you know, that's still months away. But I still enjoy this game for what it is. You know, I feel that there are some choices that I don't necessarily agree on. But at the end of the day, it was still a very great addition to the franchise, I feel. At least Dark Souls 3. And the PvP is still really fun here. If you don't like Dark Souls 1 PvP, then you can come back here. And I mean, Dark Souls 1 PvP, if you're going to do invasions, I don't think they prioritize ganks. So if you're not a big fan of lone hosts or a 2v1, then you might want to stick here in Dark Souls 3. But I mean, that's the thing, is that they could implement that change from Dark Souls 3 to Dark Souls 1 Remaster. They could prioritize ganks, so you never know. But if you don't like slow-paced combat, that was the thing. Dark Souls 1 PvP was pretty slow compared to Dark Souls 3. I mean, it's still really fun, but there is some niches that you will have to learn. Like, toggle escapes and backstabs and all this other crazy nonsense that you would have to relearn in Dark Souls 1. But I mean, and that's another thing, is that weapon arts are not going to be in the game. At least they weren't in Dark Souls 1. And you're going to be blocking with your L2 this time around. There's no dual wielding. It was pretty bare bones, but the R2s for most weapons were pretty fun. You can't infuse them with heavy though, or sharp or quality, so you better start planning your builds now. Better find a weapon that you think you might like. Like, for instance, I went completely uninspired, totally unoriginal Boulder Side Sword. That sword carried me through most of the game. I farmed for that for hours and I got it and I just beat the game with that. But bow's gonna be better than crossbow. Status effects are gonna be better. Frostbite's not gonna be there, so defense is gonna actually play a huge role. Poise is as well. So if Fashion Souls is your game, then oh my gosh, good luck in Dark Souls 1, because finding good fashion with good defense and good poise in Dark Souls 1 is super difficult. Not only that, is that weight ratio is going to be a problem, because you have to be under 30% to get that fast roll. That fast roll that you have in Dark Souls 3, the medium roll, it's actually the medium roll in Dark Souls 3, that's the fast roll from Dark Souls 1. So, Dark Souls 1 PvP is going to be interesting, to say the least, and I'm curious to see how other Dark Souls 3 content creators feel about it when they get their hands on it. But as for me, I'm pretty sure for the most part I'm going to like it. I mean, I liked it when I first played it, but then again, I played it when everything was pretty much over with and people were migrating from Dark Souls 1 to 2. So, I probably have a bias. So, I mean, I hope you enjoy it. You as a gamer, I hope you enjoy Dark Souls 1, because it is a very good game in terms of like level design, enemy placements, weapons, and all this other crazy nonsense. But I don't know. For me, Dark Souls 1 is definitely going to be a game I have to buy, just cuz, you know, even though I am having rose-tinted glasses about it, I still enjoy it, and I still play it on my Xbox 360 every now and again just to try it out, and especially now since I'm just preparing for Dark Souls 1 Remaster. But, you know, just go in it with a level head, try and go in it with no bias, see how you enjoy it. And I mean, I would definitely recommend looking at a YouTuber by the name of Martyrs Brigade 99, or as his name is in YouTube, it's going to be Jblackmel. Now, his content really helped me. His content really helped me as a duelist and an invader. Now, I also started out as a duelist in Dark Souls 1, but then I gradually made my transition to an invader. And a lot of his commentaries are very chill. You can literally put it on in the background and you can just be taken away. Like, even now I still watch a couple of his old commentaries because his commentaries are just that good and informative. So if you're going into Dark Souls 1 PvP, or heck, if you have Dark Souls 1 right now or planning to buy it before the remaster, then look at his commentaries, gain some knowledge beforehand so you can have a head start into the game before others make their transition to Dark Souls 1. But, you know, as he likes to put it, all these hot shots and, you know, gotta get off it, dude, because they're gonna be coming hot, especially all these hot shots from Dark Souls 3 with their ridiculous high speed chaos dagger and all this crazy nonsense. And so you're gonna be able to look forward to that in Dark Souls 1, because backstabs are gonna be rampant all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that it's gonna be, you know, the main thing that's gonna ruin the game, but it is a very big part of the combat, so you're gonna have to learn how to counter strafe and pivot and all this other tech and stuff like that, which you can learn from Martyrs Brigade. So I would recommend watching Martyrs Brigade. I'll put his link in the description below, because he really helps me, and I think he is probably one of the coolest Dark Souls content creators ever on this platform. But that pretty much ends my discussion for Dark Souls 1. Back to the invasions and topic at hand. My time at Lothric Castle was an interesting one. I met gankers, tryhards, necromancers, summoners, tryhards, solo hosts, the whole nine, you know. But I mainly wanted this video to showcase what I do in situations where lag is apparent and how I try to deal with lag. So particularly in summoner lag, whenever a blue comes in or a white shows up and like they're just standing around like a statue but like gliding around, what I do is I grab my controller, I locate my R1, I put my finger next to the R1 button, and I mash. Just mash it. Usually, I'm not even joking. Mash the button. I'm dead serious. Mash that button. Most of the time, I'm talking about like probably 9 out of 10 times, at least for me, it works so ridiculously well. Because what will happen is that my hits will register on their health bar, even though they're lagging. But as soon as the lag ends, all their hits that they tried to inflict to me will register. And you know what I do if they do? I locate my L1 button with my shield, and I just press it and I hold it. Or if you're really skilled, you could roll all the hits in that instance if you're feeling confident enough. But if they're mashing on their end and all the hits will register at the end of the lag. So I usually just block so I can just tank all the hits. And even if they guard break me, they're not going to get the riposte. They'll never get the riposte. What will happen is that they'll get all their damage inflicted on them, and they'll usually just back up because they just took a bunch of damage. So that's my advice to you. It may not work, but I'm just saying for me it works, so it might work for you. Who knows? But I advise to at least try it. But lag in an invasion, it becomes a real just mess, because pretty much all pseudo combos and strategy kind of go out the window at that point, and a lot of wonky things start to happen, and a lot of, you know, some very shady things start to occur, because, you know, you can't see their animations. It's made worse when they have hyper armor weapons. You can't see their animation start, and all of a sudden you just take like 3 hits, and like some lag, I'm just like, what just happened? Like they'll be locked on to like my last position, and I'm like a mile away, and they'll attack at like thin air, and I'm getting hit, and I'm like, what is going on? Just, oh man, lag in invasions are probably one of the worst things that you can encounter, and it's not even part of the actual game, or it doesn't take any real skill to cause it or anything like that. That's just, oh man, lag gives me a headache in an invasion, but oh my gosh, as an invader, you're gonna have to deal with it, because some instances you're not gonna be able to avoid lag, and what you're gonna have to know what to do whenever the time occurs. Whenever, like, say a phantom is laggy or a host is laggy and your hits won't register until like 5 seconds later. It's like, come on, dude. but for me, that's what I usually do to counter them. If you have another way to counter lag, please tell me, because I would like to know some more info on how to counter. Additionally, you could also, if they're standing still, you could also run to their back and initiate a backstab, and sometimes it will initiate, sometimes it won't, but if it does, that's pretty helpful. And grade A spawning over at Lothric Castle. I tell you, Lothric Castle spawn points, and you know, Lothric Castle is not the worst, okay? I just hate it whenever I spawn into a world and it's a 4v2 and I'm just getting summoned in and there's another invader and he's like miles away, and I feel like Miyazaki himself like placed me as far away as he could so the invader could die before I could help. That's just conspiracy theories. Really, I get a little too greedy there. But when spawn locations ever go wrong, what I usually do is I just try and find dead mobs and where they are at, because that usually gives an indicator of where the other host is. And you know, trying to locate the host isn't too difficult. Now if they purposely try to hide and go in like chameleon or gesture, that's when it becomes a problem. Like in my last video when the guy was just hiding for like an hour. I couldn't get anything off to like get his track or anything because all the mobs were dead. There was no indication of where he was at. All like the furniture was intact and stuff. That's when it becomes an issue. But you can use something in the environment to locate him. But you know, that's just another thing that you're gonna have to deal with as an invader, because not many people, at least PvEers or just players in this instance that are just going through the game, they're not gonna be too happy with an invader in their world. And if they're a solo host, it's more so. With a gank, not so much. Or a gonk, I'm sorry. With a gonk, they're not gonna really mind an invader because, you know, it's number advantage. But a solo host is going to be hiding in some instances, and you just got to be prepared to find them. And it's up to you if you want to black crystal out or stick with it and try and find them and, you know, defeat them. But that's entirely up to you. But using this Black Knight Glaive, this is my favorite halberd, man. Like, straight up, there are straight up wombo combos that you could use with this. Straight up mind games in pseudo combos. Now, of course, you could go with the true combo R1, L2, and then R1, but that I only use that occasionally. I like using, because the R2 combos into an R1, I'm not sure if it combos into the weapon art, but I know for sure the two-handed R2 combos into the R1.
trucks and my dickies and I put it on black. Banging Sinatra in a flat Cadillac. My old lady leaning out the whole window. Everybody looking when we walking slow.
Black Knight Glaive is probably my favorite halberd in this game. It just has good, unique R2s, good weapon art, and moveset. I just really enjoy using it a lot. If Gunders had some of his moves on his halberd, shoo, that would make that weapon a lot more cool. But it's fine. Another thing I didn't know was the barrels explode if you have any fire damage. And it sounds dumb, but what I thought was it would only explode if it was a bomb, you know. That was my thinking of it, but some instances I did actually hit the barrels, and it would blow some people back. And I mean, it would sometimes kill them and kill me most of the time, but it was really funny sometimes. But it's just another thing you can keep in mind. Any fire damage causes them to explode, which I didn't know. Another thing you could try, which I just do on occasion, is whenever a player is doing like activating a switch or something, you'll notice right there I threw a Lloyd's Talisman, and the reason why is because the AoE lingers. So when they get out of the iframes, they'll probably get hit with the Lloyd's Talisman on, when they get out. So whenever they're doing a riposte or whatever, you can throw a Lloyd's Talisman on them. It's just another thing you could add if you didn't already. But if you did, that's cool too. And now for my second favorite weapon in this game, just behind the Partisan, is the Ring Knight Straight Sword. And I really enjoy using this weapon for a couple of reasons. It's because of its weapon art, its range, and its damage. Its range is like just below a Goddard's, and its damage is appropriate in what I would expect from a straight sword. It's not crazy, but the weapon art allows it to be crazy. The weapon art allows some incredibly nasty combos and just some serious damage if you can land all these crazy combos and mix-ups and stuff. But one thing about it that I notice a lot of people try to do with it is that they try and pair it with a pairing shield, and to be honest, I really advise not going with a parry shield. I would advise going with a weapon art shield, because if you're gonna go with a pairing shield and you're gonna be going for parries, at that point, what's even the point of using the weapon? It's just a regular straight sword at that point, What really makes it shine is its weapon art. I mean, you can two-hand it to unlock the weapon art, but that kind of gives it away, you know what I'm saying? So I would advise using a weapon art shield to add another layer of things that the opponent has to worry about. In terms of, like, you already have the amazing one-handed straight sword moveset, and now you're going to complement that with the weapon art, which is already amazing. So that's another layer you could add. One thing that I should mention about the weapon art is that while the weapon art does allow hyper armor, the weapon art R1s do not have as much hyper armor as you would think. On this build, I have 30 poise, and yet I still find myself being staggered by like standard things like great swords, halberds, and straight swords a couple of occasions. And I don't know what it is, but it doesn't have as much as you would think, so you have to be cautious about that. Now, you can safely trade against like katanas and straight swords and all that, but if you get hit like 2 or 3 times, then you're probably going to get staggered, so just make sure you watch out for that. Another thing is that while the weapon art R2s do have a lot of hyper armor, it does leave you pretty wide open, except the second one. The first one, the lunge and stab, or lunge and thrust, it doesn't have, it's very easy to punish if, say, like they roll to your side or behind you. So you might want to either follow up with another R2 if you feel confident, or you can follow it up with a weapon R1 to, cover your sides. But I don't predominantly use that weapon art R2 too many times, and the chase down is not very great. But the weapon art is pretty good on those weapon art R2s. So I wouldn't recommend like trading into an ultra great sword or something crazy like that, but you can poise through other weapons. One idea that I've been stirring about for a while now is maybe starting a short, well, maybe not series, but maybe a collection of kind of niche weapons and showcasing them off in invasions or something, like the Valor Heart or Freed's Scythe or what have you, and just showcase it off in the hands of an invader against ganks. Because I do feel like there are some things I could give and some tips that maybe some people don't know, or just find out something unique about the weapon if they haven't thought about it. But I don't know. maybe I'll do it just to like cause some breathers here and there against all these like longer videos or something. But that's, you know, that's still just a thought or idea. If I was going to start it, I would definitely probably start it off with the Partisan or the Ring Knight Straight Sword, one of those two. But anyways, pertaining to these type of videos, I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover all of the areas before Dark Souls 1 Remaster drops, but if it does drop, I'll try my best to try and cover all of the areas in Dark Souls 3. Now, I mean, these videos, they're not even like talking about all the strategies and all this crazy nonsense, but I'm not one for that. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other people have already covered like maps and areas in detail and stuff like that. But I try here and there whenever I can, really. But if you play the level, for the most part, you already know all the like shortcuts and like the things that you can do to escape and the niches and all that. But you know, I'm not one for area analysis, but it's just a thing I guess I can try and bring to the table here and there. But the main idea of this series, the invasion campaign, is just showcasing off invasions, and maybe, you know, some dude just stumbles upon my channel and just watches a vid or two and maybe has a negative opinion about Dark Souls 3 invasions, and he's like, oh wow, this guy can do it, then I'm pretty sure I can. You know, that's kind of what this is about, because after watching Dark Souls 3 content creators and being inspired, that's when I really started to get into invasions, because I was like, wow, you know, I had that negative impression left behind by all these other, the big YouTubers, the big Dark Souls YouTubers, and they already left, so, you know, so I had to get my fix on other means, and that was small YouTube Dark Souls 3 creators. And they really helped me get out of the funk that I was in when I was dueling in Dark Souls 3, because, you know, I'm not going to shame duels and all that, because honestly, like, if you find a way to get enjoyment out of this game, or any game in that matter, you know, what's the harm of it, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else, you know? But invasions, for me, I find it it's very, well, it's fun, but you also don't know what you're gonna get. You can have like a very nice invasion, a troll invasion, necro, freaking Dawn of the Dead. You could have disconnectors, gankers, gonkers, all, you know, all of that. So, but with duels, I just, you know, straight sword, shield, backpedaling, reactive, doing all that crazy nonsense that I have a very stern distaste for. And I mean, I don't mind partaking in a duel every now and again, but when it's every so often, that's when I get kind of frustrated. And I just get like PTSD from all the times that I had to fight against a straight sword and board dude. But, you know, it's whatever. Those days are behind me, and I don't think I'm gonna be doing any duels from now on unless it's like an invasion. But I'm not gonna be stepping foot in an arena unless it's with like someone I know or something. But invasions, they're always different. Well, most of the time. Sometimes you'll get back-to-back ganks, gonks, disconnectors, or whatever the fudge. But for the most part, it's sporadic on what it is, and it never gets really boring. Now, it does get boring whenever it's just like it's just the same thing over and over, ganks and just getting point down and losing and all that. But that's the thing, is that you learn from your losses. And that's the thing, is that if you're going into invasions, you have to expect to lose. You cannot always expect to win. If you always win, then what's the fun? If it wasn't like challenging, then it wouldn't be fun, right? And some people even say that this game is an R1 simulator, that all you need is your R1 to get through the game. And I mean, to a point, I guess that has some merit, but you know, even though that can net you the day probably about 85% of the time, when you encounter a good skilled player in PvP, that won't work anymore. Or, well, maybe it will a couple of times here and there, but that's not gonna work all the time. You're gonna have to learn how to juke, mix up. You gotta learn your spacing, backstabs, parries, riposts, all this other stuff that goes in depth into the game. And you don't really realize it when you're a noob and you're just pressing R1. So I mean, I can excuse people when they R1 spam because it is the good button to press to win. But honestly, it kind of, you don't learn anything from it. Use your R2s, use your weapon, or heck, parry, I don't care. Parry spam and I'll backstab it or kick you. But do something other than R1s. Please do something other than that. Don't use the same attack over and over again. If you want to get better, you're gonna have to learn pseudo combos, spacing, and all of what I previously said. Now, one thing that really did upset me whenever I started PvP was that I felt that I hit a skill ceiling or something. I felt like there was a barrier for me personally. It's like, I don't know how I can get better at fighting and fighting against certain weapons, you know. I had troubles fighting against halberds. I had trouble fighting against curved great swords and the like. But one thing that really helped me out was once I started to use those weapons, I use all types of manners of weapons. I use, you know, hammers, whips, scythes, great swords, straight swords, curved swords, all that. Once I used all of them, all the classes, that's when I really started to realize how to fight them and how to fight with them. And once I did that, that's how I felt like the barrier was broken. Now, I'm still at another barrier. I mean, there's still another skill that I want to learn, which is, you know, backstabs and stuff. But for me, that was one barrier that really had me locked in place for a while. But once I did that, you know, once you experiment with all types of manners of weapons, that's when you start learning how to fight against and with that weapon. You know, so that's my advice. If you are having trouble with a particular weapon or a class, fight with a weapon from that class so you can learn what other people do against it and what its pros and weaknesses are. At least that's what helped me anyway. But this video is coming to an end, and if you've made it this far, then congratulations, you made it, and thank you. Honestly. Well, there's been Derpy. I'll see you guys later.